The first thing you notice isn't the open window or the wet footprints on the tile. It's the feeling that your house has been listening without you. Every step answers with a breath that isn't yours. A chair that shouldn't be angled that way. A night that knows your name and waits anyway. The lock was a suggestion. The dark says, "Come closer. Welcome to Mr. BlackWhisper." I work nights at a small hospital where the vending machines hum louder than the patients. By the time I get home, the world is waterlogged and quiet. The sun is a rumor behind the blinds, and the hall light in my apartment does that soft, apologetic flicker it always does when I twist the switch. That morning it turned on before I touched it. I stopped in the doorway, keys still in my hand. It was the smallest thing, the kind you could excuse. Maybe the switch had stuck last night. Maybe the building's wiring sighed and gave me a mercy. But the bulb wasn't flickering. It was steady. Too steady, like it knew I was supposed to be here and wanted to make it easier. I did what you always do when something feels wrong. I made chores out of dread. Shoes off, bag on the counter, phone charging. I told myself the smell, damp fabric and cold metal, was just the rain trapped in my coat. I turned on the kitchen tap so the apartment would sound like it always did. Then I saw the cereal box. I keep it in the cabinet. This one was on the counter, folded carefully shut. Not opened, not torn, just moved. A mistake I might have made if I weren't the kind of person who notices where everything lives, because I live alone, and there is no one else to blame. There was also the hall light. It had learned my name. I walked the apartment like a nurse doing rounds on a ward that didn't want to wake. Bedroom, unmade bed exactly as I'd left it. Window, locked. Closet. Shirts hanging, a smell of cedar I barely remembered buying. Bathroom. A towel on the back of the door, still damp from yesterday's shower, which made no sense. Things don't stay damp 12 hours later unless the air knows how to hold them. I returned to the hall and stared at the light. The bulb hummed, a thin insect note. I turned it off. The apartment inhaled. I turned it on. It shone. I turned it off again and left it that way, because sometimes you'd rather have dark than a light that chooses you. Sleep never comes right away after a night shift. You lie down, and the hospital keeps walking through your head. Doors, alarms, voices that won't resolve into words. I kept hearing the faucet. I had left it running. When I got up to shut it off, the hall light turned on by itself again. I shouldn't have said anything out loud. I know that. But I said, "Stop," and the word felt like I had offered it to someone who had been waiting for me to ask for help. I stood perfectly still. I heard something under the running water, a sound thin as a blade being drawn from cloth. Cabinet doors don't open themselves silently. Mine did. A thud followed, soft, polite, not a crash. A placement, like a bowl set carefully down. When I stepped into the kitchen, the sink ran bright and useless, and the cabinet under it, where I keep a toolbox and extra paper towels, was open. A damp line tracked from the cabinet to the hallway, as delicate as a fingertip trail through dust. It is astonishing how your body can pretend you are brave for exactly as long as you need to move your feet. I moved. I followed the wet mark past the cereal, past the front door, to the hall closet where I keep the vacuum. The door was barely open, just enough for a shadow to become an invitation. I put my hand on it. I pushed. A man sat inside, not crouched, not panicked. Knees neatly together, arms resting on them, head tilted back against the coats. He looked at me the way a patient looks at a nurse who is late with the pain medicine. Curious, a little betrayed. His clothes were wet, his hair matted with rain, and his shoes were on my vacuum cord like he'd tried to tuck them in. I didn't scream. I don't know why. Maybe the part of me that counts breaths just counted, and then counted again, and found room to keep counting. He watched me count. He lifted one hand slowly, showing me a small knife with tape around the handle, the way someone tapes a remote control when the back keeps falling off. He put a finger to his lips. I ran for the door. He was faster in silence than I have ever been in noise. He grabbed my wrist, the knife still in his other hand but not raised. The tape on the handle brushed my skin. He didn't pull me back toward the closet. He pulled me toward the hall light. We stood under it like two strangers at a bus stop, and he looked up at the bulb and then at me, and he smiled. The light hummed louder. He let go of my wrist. He moved past me toward the kitchen. He shut off the faucet. He walked back toward the closet, slow, unhurried, leaving beaded wet footprints that sparkled like fish scales in the humming light. He closed the closet door behind him. I left my apartment barefoot. I left the front door open. I banged on my neighbor's door, then the next one, and tried to make words through a throat that had decided to become a fist. The police came quickly, because I made them reel with panic, and because sometimes they do. They found the closet empty, the window in the bedroom forced from the inside, and the fire escape slick with rain. In the kitchen cabinet, they found the shutoff valve loosened and retaped. In the hall light, they found a timer I didn't own, threaded in like a vein. The officer told me to stay with a friend. He said the same words twice, as if one set was meant for the frightened animal I had turned into, and one set was meant for the record. He said, "It looks like he had time." He said, "It looks like he wasn't in a hurry." He said, "He wanted you to know he had been there before, and he wanted to come back." Now, when I come home from the night shift, I walk straight to the breaker box and I throw the main. I stand in the darkness and I listen to the house remember how to breathe without electricity. Somewhere in that silence, I still hear him placing a bowl so gently it never made a sound. And I leave the hall light off because it knows my name. The apartment was small enough that I could hear my daughter breathing from the couch if the TV was low. Still, the baby monitor lived on the coffee table like a lighthouse. Little green glow, soft static that told me the world was still stitched together. That night, the lullaby I'd set it to play, an inoffensive melody she liked, started by itself. I checked my phone, no alarms. I checked the monitor app, no scheduled play. The song kept going, slightly slower than usual, like it had to drag itself through heavy air. My daughter did not cry. She slept the way children sleep when they know someone taller than the room watches them. I went to her door. The room smelled like warm milk and new laundry. The window was open an inch. The monitor camera faced the crib, a fixed, obedient eye. The melody drifted from the little speaker by her head. I closed the window. I stood there long enough to feel foolish. I went back to the couch and turned the TV off completely so the apartment could be a single sound. My kid S borrowed song. Through the static, a second lullaby began. It didn't come from the monitor. It came from the living room window. It was the same melody, a hair flat, as if someone was whistling it with teeth that didn't quite meet. I froze with the remote pressed into my palm and felt every finger leave prints on the plastic. The song from the monitor, cheerful and tinny, continued. The one from the window followed, trying to keep up, missing a beat, lingering on one note too long, learning. I stood. I didn't want to, but it felt wrong to let the window sing alone. I stepped toward the curtains. I parted them exactly enough. The glass was black, a mirror full of my own pale outline and the green halo of the monitor light on the table behind me. In the reflection, something moved that wasn't me. I turned off the lamp. The living room went into that soft afterlight that makes your walls feel closer. Outside, the alley between our building and the next held its breath. The whistle stopped. Then the song began again, closer to in tune. Fewer mistakes, more sure of itself. A practice run that had become a performance. I locked the window and drew the curtains tight, pressing the edges together like a wound. I picked up the baby monitor and turned the volume down. The other lullaby kept playing, as if volume were the least of my problems. I stood with the monitor in my hand and tried to convince myself I had misheard. That's the sentence I remember thinking exactly. Convince yourself you misheard. Then the monitor camera moved. It has no reason to. It doesn't pan. It's a fixed lens. The picture shifted a fraction, a stutter like someone breathing against it. The edge of the crib went a little out of frame. The lullaby inside the room stopped. My daughter made a small sound, the kind that is either a dream or the first domino in a line of screams. I walked into her room, slow. Every step was held in the apartment's cupped hands. The monitor sat on the shelf, its tiny eye open and innocent. The crib was still. The window now was closed, the latch clean and exactly where I had left it. The curtain breathed a little in air I couldn't feel. I picked up my daughter. She smelled like warm skin and the soap that says bedtime. I felt the weight of her prove the world. When I stepped back into the hallway, something brushed my bare ankle. A line of cold, quick and exact, like a wet string. I looked down and saw nothing. I heard the other lullaby begin again, not outside anymore, but down the hall, a room away. The living room. The monitor on the coffee table showed my daughter's empty crib. The picture had not moved back. I don't remember making the decision to leave. Some decisions come from a part of you that doesn't care whether you look ridiculous. I carried my daughter to the hallway door, picked up my purse with one hand, didn't bother with shoes, and opened the door as quietly as a person can in a life that suddenly weighs a lot. The lullaby in the living room stopped. The monitor showed static for one long inhale. Then the picture returned to the crib, perfectly centered. I stood in the hall. It smelled like dust and the pizza place downstairs. Somewhere far away, a door closed. My neighbor opened her door and saw me barefoot, baby on my shoulder, keys clenched in my teeth. She nodded. That nod lives in me now, a small benediction. She let us come in without asking why. The police found the window screen cut from the outside and then carefully set back. They found a long scratch under the baby's crib where a knee had pressed hard while weight shifted. They found the monitor app had been accessed from an IP that wasn't mine. They told me about crimes that use lullabies, how sound can be a method. They said the words familiarization and conditioning, and I felt my heart tilt against my ribs like a glass on a tray. I moved out within a month. I sleep with the window painted shut now, a seam of white hardness that pleases something raw in me. Sometimes I hear a tune in a store and my lungs decide to stay empty a few seconds longer. That's how it lives with me, as a pause, as proof that sound can arrive before danger, as the knowledge that two songs once learned each other over my child's bed. I still keep a monitor even though she's older. The green light watches her sleep. Sometimes it reflects in the dark like an eye that refuses to close. I tell myself it's good. I tell myself I am too. On the worst nights, the truth is simpler. I don't sing anymore. When the landlord said a prospective buyer might tour the building, I pictured tidy couples and polite shoes. I didn't unpicture the realtor's lockbox hanging on the front railing like a gray tooth, waiting for someone else's code. I didn't think about how many contractors know the pattern that opens anything that needs opening. I didn't imagine my spare key in a stranger's mouth. It was a little house sliced into apartments. My door opened into a cramped living room with books that leaned from cheap shelves. The narrow kitchen had a window over the sink that liked whatever weather it was given. I worked from home, headphones on, which is another way of saying I constructed a second world and sat inside it while the first one moved pieces around me. The first wrong thing was the smell of cigarette smoke, hidden but fresh, like someone had blown it into their shirt and opened that shirt in my bedroom. I don't smoke. No one on my floor does. The second was the chair under the bedroom window. I never put it there. It faced the window like it expected a performance. The third was the email from the landlord. Hope the viewing went well. No notice. No knock I missed. Just an event I had been present for in absentia. I asked him for the schedule. He said the realtor handled it. He said the realtor had the spare key in the lockbox. He said, "They're very professional," which is a sentence like a clean napkin placed over something you shouldn't see. I told him to remove the key. He said he'd look into it. That night, I put a chair under the front doorknob, the way my grandmother did when she visited. It looked theatrical. It looked like I was play-acting a siege. I slept badly, which is to say, I never actually slept. I just kept closing my eyes and opening them in a different minute. At 3:21 a.m., the chair trembled. There are textures to fear. Cold air collecting around your wrists. The sense that your inner ear has misreported the level of the floor. The knowledge that wood speaks when it is asked to keep a secret. The chair shivered again as the knob turned slowly, too slow for ordinary impatience. I lay in bed and watched the dark thicken. Sometimes you learn things about yourself when a door decides whether to keep being a door. I learned I could move without making sound where there should be sound. I made myself smaller with every step. I picked up my phone. I did not call anyone. The idea of talking out loud felt like asking permission. The knob stopped turning. The chair settled. From the hallway, a footstep retreated. Another. Then nothing. I stood there with the phone hot in my hand, and my heart beat so loud it felt like a third presence. I waited until the kind of silence I could live inside returned. Then I slid the chain into place. I should have done that earlier. I should have done a lot of things earlier. In the morning, the lockbox was gone from the railing. In its place was a new one, shinier, smaller, clever. The landlord texted, "All set, new box." I stared at the message like it could be a person in a room with me, an extra body to make the place feel less empty. I thought of the chair by the bedroom window. I pushed it back where it belonged and felt like I had erased a footprint. The second night, the knob didn't turn. The third night, something moved in the kitchen. It was gentle, almost considerate. A cabinet that didn't quite latch breathed open and shut. A glass touched the counter and then was lifted again, as if someone were practicing making no sound. The refrigerator motor clicked on exactly when I needed any noise to not be human. I stood in the hallway and watched the darkness for shapes that had resolved themselves into range. I thought of the key in the lockbox. Not one of mine exactly, but a cousin with my laugh and my jawline. I thought of codes, and how often people reuse things they shouldn't. I thought of the realtor's assistant, the contractor, the landlord's nephew, the buyer's inspector, all the hands that briefly hold access as if it were the same as ownership. I thought of smoke folded into a shirt. I made a decision I am not proud of. I opened the front door and stepped into the hall with my phone light low. The smell of old carpet and cleaning solution made a shallow ocean around my feet. I walked to the front railing and tested the new box. 4 digits. I tried the year the building was built. I tried the landlord's birthday. I tried the obvious. It opened on the second try. My spare key sat there, perfectly obedient. I took it. I closed the box on emptiness and felt something inside me unclench. I put the key in my pocket and went back inside and set the chain and put the chair under the knob again because rituals matter to animals. And I am an animal. At 4:06 a.m., the knob turned again. This time, it turned fast, irritated. The chair pushed, metal feet whispering a protest against the floor. The chain took the pressure and rang like a fork against crystal. A low sound came through the door, a throat refusing to be a whisper. Then silence. I stood with my back against the door until the sun leaked into the edges of the blinds. When I finally slept, I dreamed of a hallway full of identical doors, all of them turning. 2 days later, I met the realtor on the stairs. She had bright hair and shoes that announced polished competence. She smiled, hands full of folders, and told me there would be another viewing. Her assistant, a man with clean fingernails and a phone that never left his palm, went ahead to make sure everything is secure. He walked to my door. He put in a code. He opened the lockbox. He made a small sound when he found nothing inside. He looked at me, then at the door, then at the box again, as if the sequence had been wrong and reality needed resetting. He said nothing, but the surprise was a confession. I moved a week later. I told the landlord my schedule changed. I told myself I was overreacting. I moved anyway. I turned the spare key in at the office and watched the receptionist drop it into a drawer with 20 others. In the new place, I sleep with a chair under the knob because old habits don't care about new addresses. Sometimes in the middle of the night, I think I hear a cabinet in the kitchen practicing how to make no sound, and I keep one key that opens nothing to remind me what doors really are. The big house on the hill wasn't mine. I was a caretaker. 2 rooms tucked behind the garage, a narrow view of pines, a job to walk in circles and notice whether things had shifted. The owners lived far away. They liked their security cameras and their codes. They liked the idea of presence without having to be present. I was the presence. In the evenings, I walked the perimeter, deer trail by the fence, patio chairs covered, the pool a black rectangle swallowing stars. I carried a flashlight I rarely used because darkness is honest if you're quiet. I liked the drone of the highway miles away, proof of other people's lives moving past mine. The first wrong thing was the motion light on the east side of the house. It would flick on at odd hours and stay on, as if someone had learned the exact distance to stand so they could keep it alive without triggering it fully. The camera would catch nothing, or rather, it would catch stillness. Light needs movement to tell a story. This light told me someone knew that. One night, the owners texted, "Seeing weird alerts. Can you check the basement?" They added a smiley face. I walked around the pool and used their side door. The big house smelled like lemon cleaner and cold stone. The basement door was at the end of a hallway that believed itself to be timeless. I opened it and felt the weight of stairs that wanted to be quiet. The basement was a series of small choices. Light switch here, fuse box there, shelves of labeled plastic bins, winter decor, summer cushions, emergency water. The security panel glowed in the corner. A tiny red number told me there had been 4 alarms in the last hour, all cleared. The cameras showed still frames of the motion light washing the gravel with pale certainty. Then I heard breathing. Not heavy, not dramatic. Just the sound of a person trying to remember how to be air. It came from behind the water heater, where the wall jogged, an architectural hiccup. I lifted the flashlight now and saw a narrow gap barely wide enough for a body that had decided to be obedient. The beam found nothing, which told me everything. I backed away. I didn't call the owners. I didn't call anyone yet. I went outside and stood under the motion light and watched moths throw themselves against what they couldn't T-name. The flashlight felt like a lie in my hand, offering illumination that made me more visible. I slept poorly, which means I never stopped listening. At 2:14 a.m., my door handle moved. The sound was faint, almost courteous. I lay still and placed my fingers around my phone, the way you grip a rope without pulling it. The handle moved again, a short click, like someone testing whether I'd remembered to lock it. I had. The silence that followed was patient. Morning doesn't fix anything that doesn't want to be fixed. I checked the house. Nothing moved. I checked the cameras. A shadow shaped like a mistake at the edge of a frame. I texted the owners and told them the alerts looked like false positives, animals, wind. They sent a thumbs up like a receipt. That afternoon, a delivery truck came up the long drive. The driver handed me a box with the owner's name and a roll of tape on top, a kindness for resealing things. The box was light for its size. I took it to the garage. I cut the tape. Inside, a folded quilt, a pair of men's socks, a small wrapped sandwich, a note that said, "For him." The handwriting was not the owner's. There are moments when the story you thought you were in bends. I stood with the box open and felt the house lean. I carried it to the basement. I set it by the water heater gap and stepped back and waited in the kind of silence that makes you hear your own teeth shift. Nothing emerged. The breathing I'd heard last night didn't return. The box looked like a trap that had accidentally learned tenderness. I left it and went back to my rooms. An hour later, it was empty. I told myself to stop. I told myself the owners must know, must be part of it, must be playing at charity. like it was a game that kept the house from getting bored. But the note had said, "For him, not for the caretaker's attention." And a sandwich is not surveillance. Night fell with purpose. The motion light did its performance. I sat in the dark with my back against my own door and listened to the handle try to be gentle. After the third attempt, a soft knock came, specific to my height. Then a voice, not a whisper, not loud, just a human voice saying, "Please." Not my name, not a command, a request tiny enough to ruin me. I opened the door because I am a person, and because I had already decided that even if I was wrong, I would rather be wrong while being kind than right while being hard. The man in the doorway was thin enough to apologize for his shape. He smelled like laundry left overnight in the machine. His hair was clean. His eyes were not scared. He looked past me at the small room and its 2 chairs and its table that knew how to be useful. He said he wouldn't come in. He said he just wanted to ask whether I had the box. He said he would leave after. He did not ask for money. He did not ask to use my phone. He did not offer a story to make me comfortable. He asked for the box, like you ask for your own shoes. I gave him what was left, the quilt, because warmth is bigger than the space it takes. He took it and nodded like we had completed a transaction neither of us could afford. Then he said something I didn't expect. He said, "They don't know." He meant the owners. He meant I had been feeding a mouth the cameras weren't interested in. He meant I was the wrong kind of presence now. I didn't sleep at all. At 4:07 a.m., the motion light on the east side flicked off and stayed off. In the basement, the panel registered no alarms. In the morning, the owners texted, "Thinking of changing caretakers. Thanks for your help." They included a smiley face. I packed. I left the key where the instructions told me to leave it. I took one last walk around the property and stood by the basement window and listened to the house breathe like a thing recently told it would be alone again. Sometimes, when a road ends, it doesn't. It just narrows until only one person can walk it at a time. I don't know where he went after that. I only know I hear 2 kinds of knocks now in my sleep. The kind that asks for entry, and the kind that checks whether the door will open when it matters. I answer neither. My father's farmhouse sits where the horizon can be seen making up its mind. Cornfields in 3 directions, a thin line of trees in the 4th. I moved back to help after his surgery, then stayed because the house sounded like my childhood. Refrigerator chatter, screen door clap, the slow pulse of the well pump like a heart too big for its ribs. The first time I heard the drone, I thought it was a distant tractor. It came at dusk. That hour the fields turned from gold to a darker idea of themselves. A small, insistent whir that moved without the logic of ground vehicles. It passed overhead and hovered, a polite insect, then drifted toward the field road and disappeared, as if it had found its way home. The second night, it came closer. It paused above the backyard. It adjusted itself in tiny corrections, making the kind of sharp mechanical hum my father's old radios used to hate. I stepped outside and shaded my eyes and tried to see it against the darkening sky. It rose, then dipped, then stilled, watching the roofline, learning the angles of the house like it was reading a face. I told myself someone was filming their property. I told myself hobbyists existed even here. Then I found the footprint by the kitchen window. It wasn't dramatic, just a single print pressed into the damp dirt under the sill, the shape of a boot with a pebble stuck in the tread. The window lock had a smear on it, like someone with too much lotion on their hands had remembered to touch every part of the house that could open. I told my father. He shrugged and said the raccoons were bold this year. He said people in town talked about drones like they were birds, nothing more. He said not to worry. He went to bed early because surgery steals the night from people. I sat at the kitchen table and listened to the drone return. There are sounds that feel like questions. This one asked, "What is the pattern of your light switches? What time does the refrigerator cycle? How long does the dog bark before it gives up? Where do you put the spare key when you make the mistake of having one?" At 1:12 a.m., the back door handle moved. The dog, old, loyal, tired, lifted her head and didn't growl. The handle stopped. The drone sound faded. It returned 5 minutes later, higher, like someone had backed away and then reconsidered. I turned off the last lamp and let the house become a shape that could lie. I slept in the chair that night, a blanket over my knees like a rite. The drone came again, then again, each time briefer, like a pulse check. The next morning, the mailbox held a flyer. We buy houses, cash, no inspections. The phone number had been cut off with scissors and taped back slightly crooked, like someone in a hurry had remembered manners. I threw it out. The drone returned that evening and hovered above the roof, longer this time, as if a decision had grown hands. At 3:03 a.m., the back door opened. I had never heard that sound while the house slept. It is different at night, each hinge a confession. I rose halfway from the chair before telling myself to sit back down. I waited for a heavy step, a cough, the normal errors people make when they put their body where it doesn't belong. None came. The door settled and the kitchen breathed someone in. I stood. I picked up the phone. I did not dial. The dog lifted her head again, then laid it back down with a sigh that said she had decided we were doing the wrong thing, together. He walked past the doorway like a shadow believing in itself. Not a mask, not a monster. A man in a dark jacket and a hat that made his head a smooth curve. He smelled like the corner of a hardware store where winter lives. He did not look at me. He looked at the hallway, and then at the stairs, and then at the wall, where my father's framed maps hung, and he nodded, as if reciting lines he'd memorized. He went upstairs without a sound. I heard him in the bedroom, then the bathroom, then the closet we never used because my father kept the important things in places so boring no one would look. He came back down. He paused at the kitchen table. He looked at my empty glass and left it exactly where it was. He stepped outside. The drone rose so quickly the air seemed to remember being still. It followed him down the field road like a pet that had finally learned the trick. The sheriff arrived at dawn, called by a neighbor who had seen a light where our house preferred no one look. He found the back door latch had been worked from the outside with something thin and knowing. He found shoe prints by 3 windows, each with the same pebble mark. He said a word I didn't know, patterning, and another I did, testing. He said they sometimes use drones to learn when a place sleeps. We changed the locks. We bought a big light that makes the yard look less honest. We moved the spare key into a place that isn't a place at all. The drone didn't come back. That should have helped. It didn't. Weeks later, on a morning so clear it made the corn stubble shine, I walked the field road to where the drone had always turned. The dirt there had a smoothness to it, a regular scuff. Someone had stood in this exact spot many nights entering numbers on a controller, eyes lifted. A quiet patient as a doctor's waiting room. I stood there too and listened to nothing. It felt like being measured. I still sleep in the chair sometimes. The dog puts her head on my foot and dreams, feet twitching. Every now and then, a small fly buzzes at the window screen and I hear a phantom whir above the roof, a memory that refuses to shut off. I remind myself to breathe. I remind myself we were lucky. It is an ugly kind of luck, the kind that says, tonight, they didn't want the house, they wanted to know how, and I can't unknow that they do. It was a workday morning, the kind that starts with repeating a name to yourself so you don't forget it in the elevator. I left my apartment at 8:07 a.m., coffee heat pooling on my tongue, lock turned, handle checked. The hallway smelled like someone else's toast. When I came back at 6:19 p.m., a package waited for me on the kitchen table. Not outside the door, not against the threshold. On the table where my keys go. The box was small, brown, unremarkable, no label, a neat square of tape. I stood in the doorway and tried to hear whether the apartment had been disturbed. Air has a way of telling you when it remembers another person. The bedroom felt exactly the temperature it should. The bathroom mirror held no new fog. The fridge hummed in a way that said it had kept humming. And yet the package sat there like a cat you don't own. I didn't touch it. I looked for entry. The front door showed no marks. The balcony was locked from the inside, sliding door dusty with my own footprints. The windows had latches like stubborn little mouths. The ceiling hatch to the crawl space above the hallway hung flush, its paint line unbroken. Everything was as it had been, except for the box. I called the building office. The manager said no one had come in. Maintenance had not serviced anything. Packages go to the package room, he reminded me, and his voice added the unspoken, not to your kitchen table. He asked if I was sure I hadn't brought it in and forgotten. I said I was sure. He made a concerned noise that people make when they dawn to want to get off the phone because you sound like a story they might have to tell later. I hung up. I sat on the couch and looked at the box and listened to my hands not shaking. I opened it. Inside, a set of keys on a plain ring. One looked like mine. One looked like the building's. One looked like a mailroom locker. One looked like a car I didn't own. There was also a blurry photo of my front door from the hallway, taken from low, as if the camera had been resting at ankle level, and a small folded note that said only, "Use these in case you forget." I didn't understand the note, because it refused to wear meaning. "In case you forget," suggested kindness, the kind that keeps a spare key with a neighbor, the kind that writes reminders on paper and sticks them to mirrors. It also suggested practice. Do something often enough, and your mistakes become habits. Then the note becomes a map. I checked my own keys, all present. I tried the unfamiliar one in the front door. It fit, which felt like gravity loosening. I tried the building key in the stairwell door. It fit too, a polite click that sounded like collaboration. The mailroom key turned a box that had mail with my name in it, and a postcard that had my name misspelled the way customer service reps sometimes do. The car key remained a mystery, cool and light in my palm, a possibility I didn't want. I called the police. They came and looked at the photo and the keys and the unbroken latches and the set of facts that sat badly together. They dusted for prints and found mine and one partial on the box that looked like a smudge with ambition. They asked if I had a former partner who liked puzzles. They asked if anyone at work had reason to be clever at me. They left with the photo and the note and told me to stay somewhere else tonight. I didn't. I couldn't make myself leave. The apartment was my shape. Leaving felt like admitting it could be poured into another mold. I turned every lock twice. I put a chair under the knob because that's what people think helps. I put the keys back in the box and set it on the table, and sat up until my eyes made the room swim, then blinked and started over. At 2:36 a.m., someone tried the wrong key first. It's a small sound, the difference between a key that belongs and one that wants to. The wrong one tapped against the pins, then slid out. Another entered. Metal speaking to metal. Old friends trying to remember the right joke. The chair held. The chain sat like a line someone else had drawn. The third key turned, and the latch softened. The door didn't open. The chair kept its dignity. The chain was a throat tightened. The key turned back out. The wrong one tried again, as if this were a game of patience. I sat on the floor and leaned against the other side of the door and counted in my head until 95 because I couldn't think of another number. Then the sound stopped. Nothing moved. The air slowly gave me back the heat of my own skin. I waited a long time. I must have slept there because I woke to morning pounded thin by daylight. The box was still on the table. Inside, there was now a second note. You did remember. The handwriting was the same careful print. The keys were exactly as I had left them. The photo was gone. That's when the wrongness clarified. Whoever had come could open my door, had opened it earlier, had entered, and set a package on my table, had a copy of my daylight, had stood in my kitchen long enough to decide which surface showed the right kind of clean. But when the chair and chain held, they hadn't pushed. They had chosen to leave the box and try again later, with me awake. The police took the new note seriously in a way they hadn't taken the first. They talked about a series of apartment entries nearby, no theft, no vandalism, nothing but the idea of access left behind like a handprint. We were being taught something, they said, which is the worst use of that verb. They said they would increase patrols. I changed the locks. I stopped using the mailroom. I started carrying my keys in my pocket inside a small cloth bag like a talisman. But I kept one thing I should have thrown away. I kept the car key. It fits nothing I own. Sometimes I hold it at the door and imagine it working. I imagine the turn, the softening, the line of movement that tells your shoulder what to do. I imagine me on the other side, deciding whether to move the chair, whether to speak into the space between the hinges and say what I should have said, which is that some doors aren't meant to open, and some lessons we refuse to learn until someone writes them down in careful print and leaves them where we eat. I still live here. I sit with my back against the door some nights. I can feel the hallways cool through the wood, the whole building's lungs breathing out toward me. It is almost comforting. Almost. And sometimes, just before I sleep, I swear I hear a key turn gently in a lock somewhere very near, not opening, just remembering how.